she said yes to everything. Every invitation, every networking event, every, hey, you know, there's a few of us getting together for drinks after work, you should come. And her calendar was jam-packed. And she was surrounded by people constantly. And she had never, not once in her adult life, felt more alone. And that's where I want to start today, because Sarah's story, and I'm going to come back to her, is the story I hear most out of all the stories. Someone doing all the right things, ticking all the boxes, and still feeling this quiet, hollow ache that nobody around them seems to understand. So if you've ever felt lonely in a crowded room, or guilty maybe for preferring a quiet night instead of going to a party, or feeling like something must be wrong with you because you don't need a wide social circle, then this is for you. And by the end of this, I want you to understand something that the mainstream conversation about loneliness almost never says. The problem isn't that you're not social enough. The problem might be that you've been measuring your social life against the wrong template entirely. I also want to talk about something that took me a long time to untangle. The difference between isolation and solitude, because those two things are not the same, and conflating them has caused a lot of unnecessary suffering. So more on that in a bit. So the Surgeon General of the United States declared in 2023, he declared that loneliness was a public health epidemic. I think many of you will be aware that he said that. That's not a small statement. So the Surgeon General's office is the same institution that tells us how many cigarettes are killing us. And the data that they put forward said that chronic loneliness increases your risk of premature death by about 30%, which is roughly equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that land for a second. 15 cigarettes a day. And 1 in 2 adults, 1 in 2, report feeling measurable loneliness. Not just, I wish I had more friends, but loneliness that affects their daily functioning and well-being. So this isn't small. This is a genuine crisis. And I think it's worth asking, if this is so widespread, why is the only advice we seem to get just get out more, join a club, go to more events? Because if that advice worked, we wouldn't be here. Now, I spent 13 years traveling the world largely by myself. And I want to tell you something. I know loneliness, not the romanticized version of solo travel where you're sipping coffee in a Parisian cafe looking pensive. I mean the kind of loneliness where you're in a beautiful place and there's no one to turn to and say, are you seeing this? This is the kind where you can have an experience that changes you, and there's no one in your life who was there who can hold the memory with you. Now that's a specific kind of loneliness. And I also know from those same years the profound, restorative, completely different experience of chosen solitude, of being alone and feeling whole. Those are not the same things. So isolation is what happens when connections cut off, either by circumstance or by shutting yourself down. It's not chosen. Or if it is chosen, maybe it comes from fear or maybe it comes from pain. It doesn't come from preference. And isolation leaves you feeling depleted and cut off and invisible. Now, solitude is something else entirely. Solitude is chosen aloneness that restores you. So it's the quiet that you seek out because you need it. It's the walk by yourself. It's the morning before anyone else is up. It's the evening with a book and no obligations. And for a lot of people, especially introverts, solitude isn't just nice to have, it's how they function. And here's what the research actually says about introverts and loneliness, because this is the part I think most people have got completely backwards. Studies show that introverts actually experience higher average levels of loneliness than extroverts. Not because they need more social time, but because most social contexts are designed for breadth, not depth. So networking events, parties, work happy hours, group chats, all of these are optimized for surface level interaction, for brief exchanges, for first impressions, for small talk. And small talk for a lot of introverts isn't just unpleasant, it can actually make the loneliness worse because you're expending social energy, but you're not actually feeling seen or known. So you go home more depleted than where you left and no closer to genuine connection. So tell me if this sounds familiar. Someone in your life, maybe a parent, a partner, or a sibling keeps telling you, you need to put yourself out there more, that you're too much of a homebody, that you need more friends. And you're sitting there thinking, but I don't want more friends. I want the 3 people I already love to actually have time for me. Or maybe it's internal. Maybe you're the one telling yourself there's something wrong with you because your idea of a perfect weekend doesn't involve a crowd. Here's what I want you to know. From an extrovert who has studied introversion on a big level, there's nothing wrong with you. What researchers have actually found, and I love this finding, is that introverts get an even greater boost to happiness from deep, meaningful conversations than extroverts do. So think about that. The very thing introverts crave, real depth, real knowing, gives them a disproportionate larger happiness return than it does for people who are wired differently. So if you're an introvert, you just need a different kind of connection. Now, I want to tell you about a guy, Brian, who I worked with. Brian's in his late 30s, deeply introverted, has been his whole life. His family means well, they love him, but they've never really understood why he isn't more social, why he doesn't have a wider circle, why he would rather spend a Friday evening having dinner with one close friend than going to a party where he knows 30 people. So for years, Brian operated under this low-grade belief that he was somehow defective, that the way he was wired was actually a liability. And he tried the advice, went to more events, he put himself out there, and he did make more acquaintances, more people who would wave to him in a parking lot, more people he could text happy birthday to once a year, and he still felt lonely. Because here's the problem. Here's the thing about loneliness that nobody really talks about. It's not a numbers problem. It's a depth problem. So if we look at the language of the Surgeon General and the actual report, if we look at his own language, he talks about the quality of relationships, not the quantity. So 2 or 3 people who actually know you, who know your history, who know your fears, who know your specific way of seeing the world. That's the protection. That's the thing that buffers against loneliness. Not 50 acquaintances, not a social calendar that looks impressive from the outside. And Brian didn't need a transformation of his personality. He just needed permission to stop measuring himself against an extrovert's template, to invest deeply in the few relationships that actually mattered to him, rather than spreading himself thin, trying to collect connections. And when I got him to do that, when I got him to stop apologizing for the way he was wired and started leaning into it, things shifted. Not dramatically, not overnight, but that hollow feeling started to ease. All right? And so this brings me back to another woman that I worked with. Her calendar was full. She had acquaintances everywhere. She was never technically alone. But she felt miserable because none of those people knew her. Not really. She was just performing connection, showing up, saying the right things, laughing at the right moments, but she was never actually letting anyone in. And partly that was self-protection. And partly it was the contexts that she was showing up in never really created space for something real. You know, there's actually research on this too. There's a study that found that people who view solitude negatively, so who see being alone as something to be solved or escaped, actually feel lonelier even in social situations. People who have a positive relationship with solitude feel less lonely overall, not because they're antisocial, but because they're not running from themselves. So they know the difference between being alone and being isolated. And that self-knowledge changes everything. So this woman I was coaching didn't need to go to more events. She needed to go to fewer and to be more present, more real in the ones that she chose to go to. So I want to ask you something. When was the last time you had a conversation, a real one, where you said something true about yourself? Not polished, not performative, just honest. Not, I'm good, really busy, yeah, things are great. But actually real, where the other person looked at you and you felt, yeah, that person actually sees me. So if you can think of a recent one, I want you to hold on to that person, because that relationship is more valuable than it might look. And if you're struggling to think of one, that's important information. That's not a character flaw. That might just be a signal that the relationships you have need a different kind of investment, or that you need to create context for different kinds of conversations. So that's also a thing. I know for myself, I make a point when I'm at a dinner or something and I want there to be depth, I create it, right? That's an important piece for us to understand. We have control of it. All right? So let's come back to the isolation versus solitude distinction, because I want to make it practical. If you're someone who needs a lot of alone time and you've been told your whole life that's something to fix, the question worth sitting with is, when you're alone, how do you feel? If being alone leaves you feeling restored or clear or more like yourself, that's solitude. That's healthy. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it needs to do. So don't pathologize it. And if being alone leaves you feeling worse, more anxious, more hollow, like you're disappearing, that might be tipping into isolation. Not because you're alone, but because the aloneness is happening alongside a sense of being cut off. And that's worth paying attention to. So the difference isn't how many hours you spend by yourself, it's whether the aloneness is nourishing you or depleting you. Now here's the part I don't want you to miss, especially if you're young. Probably going to ask me what I mean by young, but 18 to 24. 79% of adults between 18 to 24 report being lonely. Now that is not a small number. And the 30 to 44 age group is actually the loneliest of all. So this is happening right in the middle of the life stages where the culture tells us we should be most connected, dating, building careers, raising families. So if you're in one of those stages and feeling alone, I see you. You are part of a very large, very undeserved group of people who have been handed advice designed for a different kind of person, and you've been told to make it work. So the solution isn't to be less introverted. The solution is to be strategic about where you invest your very limited social energy. Fewer invitations accepted with genuine willingness. Fewer surface conversations replaced with a few real ones. Fewer relationships that are maintained by proximity and habit. More relationships that you've chosen consciously, that you're actively tending. So it's not about withdrawing from the world, it's about being more intentional inside it. I want to say one more thing. It's about the courage piece. Because going deeper in relationships requires something. It requires letting someone else see you before you're certain they can handle it. And this is genuinely scary, especially if you've been burned before. Especially if the people who were supposed to know you growing up didn't really show up. And I don't want to gloss over that. Depth isn't always safe. Not everyone earns it. And learning to be discerning about who gets the real you, that is not avoidance, that's wisdom. But there's a difference between discernment and the kind of protective armor that keeps everybody out. And a lot of lonely people, especially introverts, have built armor so good they can't tell anymore that it's armor. So if you're in that place, I'm not going to tell you to tear it down. I'm going to ask, is there one person in your life, just one, who might be safe enough to let a little more of the real you through? Not a big dramatic reveal, just a slightly truer conversation than you normally have. Now, this woman I was coaching, we eventually got her to find her way, not by cancelling her social life. She still shows up to things, but she started to notice which relationships left her feeling more like herself and which ones left her feeling like she'd been performing for 2 hours. So she got more protective of her time and more generous with her presence. Those two things, which sound like they're in conflict, actually work together. And she found 2 people, just 2, that she actually let know her. The messy parts, the fears, the weird obsessions. And she told me, that's more than enough. That is actually enough. Not 50 connections, not a packed calendar, 2 people who actually know her and the space to be alone without it meaning that she's failing at something. That's what I want for you. Not more socializing, but deeper connection. Not a bigger social life, a truer one. You don't need to be fixed. You need permission to stop living by someone else's social template. And if you need a place to start, come and do the happiness quiz. IintendToBeHappy.com. You find the link in the description. Let's get you on track to being happier. And if this resonated, please subscribe. Please send it to someone that you love and care about. I'm making these all the time, and I want to help you on your path to being happier. As always, take care. Be kind, go gently in the world.